Greetings! In this video I'll be painting a Command Squad veteran from the Death Knights chapter. For this guy I wanted to have a tilt shield so I could do some heraldry. The tilt shields are only usually used for sergeants or higher ranking personnel, and I forgot to use a helmet with a skull on it, so he can't be a sergeant. So instead I went for a Command Squad veteran. Otherwise it's a normal intercessor model, though I've made a custom pauldron with the chapter armorial on it, as I didn't have any Black Templar decals back then when I built this guy. Otherwise I'd have used them instead. And like usual after assembly, I primed the model black. Now onto the painting, and starting with the armour. I used Warpstone glow to build up a base coat. This took more layers than I thought, and I probably should have gone for a brighter undercoat, like a grey, if I was doing this again. Onto Black Legion now, to paint in the soft armour joints and the black bits on the chapter armorial on the left pauldron. For the tilt shield, I checked the size of the transfers that I wanted to use, and painted in a section black for some decals later. Now for some Ulthuan grey, to paint in a white helmet to denote this marine as a veteran, and I also painted in the white skull as part of the chapter armorial. The tilt shield also received a little white stripe, which I put some decals on later. Next I applied some gloss varnish around the model to help with applying decals later. This helps the decals stick close to the surface, and after solvents like Microset and Microsol, the end result looks almost painted on. I decided to paint in the leather while waiting for the gloss varnish to dry, starting with Rhinox hide to base coat the leather pouches and belt. Skrag brown was then used to do some little bits of damage and just add some texture to both the edges and the flat surfaces around the leather. Deathclaw brown finishes the leather, applied in smaller areas to emphasise details that I painted in earlier. Now for the red details, using Mephiston red. I'm going to paint the wrist lights and the eye lenses brighter, with the bolt rifle casing and any wiring around the model not getting to the final highlight pass. Evil Sunz Scarlet was next, highlighting the wrist lights and eye lenses but leaving the recesses. And then doing a rough edge highlight for the weapon casing and a thin line for any of the wires. Onto Wild Rider Red now, to do a smaller highlight of the previous colours. I also used this to do some scratching effects on the bolt rifle casing. Lugganath orange was used last, applying it in the centre of where I wanted a glow effect to be, for both the wrist lights and eye lenses. I briefly went back to the previous colours to clean up the eyes, as it's a bit difficult to reach in there. Now for the company marking, using Xereus purple on the pauldron trims. This purple colour denotes 7th company, though I was considering using 6th company for a while, which would use orange. I went for purple as I don't think I've done that before on the channel, and I think orange would have clashed with the red weapon casing. To highlight the pauldron trims, I used some Genestealer purple, doing an edge highlight and a few scratches for weathering. At this point I applied some decals off camera. I placed some skulls, signifying command, Maltese cross to match the one on the chapter armorial, and a company number on the white stripe on the tilt shield. There's a crux on the power pack, and a skull on both the knee and the right shoulder pad. I think I used too many skulls, but it is Warhammer, so it's probably fine. Onto the metallics now, starting with gunmetal grey for, well, the gunmetal. I also painted in the Imperialis on the torso, and the helmet and power pack details. To highlight the metal, I did a highlight with Duraluminium, going along the edges, dotting the rivets, and building up some additional shine on the more exposed surfaces. I then briefly went back to Ulthuan Grey to clean up the helmet, where I'd gone over whilst painting the eyes. Then I went back to Warpstone Glow to paint some battle damage on the markings. This helps tie the decals in with the rest of the paint scheme, and lessens the impact of the sheer number of skulls I used. Now to highlight the green armour itself, using Warboss green. I wanted a brighter green that didn't go warmer this time around, otherwise I'd have used moot green. I did some scratches, edge highlights, and made sure to paint a little bit under the scratches that I did on the decals. This can help those scratches look a bit more 3D. Going further with the battle damage, I used some Rhinox hide over the thicker bits of the Warboss green to paint some deeper scratches. It's important to keep some of the highlight colour visible, as it forms an edge around the damage which I think helps sell the effect. And now finally onto an enamel wash to get some definition in those recesses, and to add some grime to the overall model. I applied this all over the model, but tried to go lightly over the helmet. I wanted the helmet to be a bit darker, but not be as smothered as the armour itself was. After I left the enamel to dry for a few hours, mainly to stop the basing material sticking to the legs, I applied my usual basing method, painted the base rim black, and then sealed everything in with some ultramatte varnish. And here we have it! A Command Squad veteran from the Death Knight's 7th Company. I'm fairly pleased with how this one came out. The green works really well after the weathering, though I'm not much of a fan of this shade of green. Feels like it should be brighter, less saturated, or warmer. It's stuck in a weird spot where it's not olive enough to be like a militaristic green, and not colourful enough to be like a fancy heraldry green. If any of you guys have any suggestions for greens from brands other than Citadel that might fill this gap, let me know in the comments. Beyond that, I'm happy with the way I did the tilt shield. I've been wanting to do more heraldic designs using decals and different field patterns, but haven't really had much of an opportunity to do so. Might try to incorporate more of these into future builds, or maybe even some back banners if I have relevant decals. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. I hope you stick around for the next one.